Oh, hi.
Yeah, we're good now. We're on. Thanks for taking some time to chat a little bit about your design program and your research around Bucci, which is the beauty and the Booch, and a little bit of SCOBY fabric as well as different materials. So thanks for joining us, Theo.
Well, thank you for the invitation. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, right on. So we had one of the videos you just had released for all the attendees of the virtual kombucha conference entitled "Beauty and the Booch," and you called it a documentary about creating fabric and kind of the thought process behind your research. And we chatted with a few other designers and researchers. Was this the first time you've actually documented the
Yes,
process in
exactly.
that way?
Yeah, exactly. It was the first time that, well, it was the first time for me to make a whole documentary. Usually at school, it's only like 4 minutes long documentary about several projects. But yeah, it was the first time. So, uh, apologize for the possible flaws during the video. I'm not yet like Spielberg, but I'm working on this. And yeah, also it was the first time to have like this opportunity to kind of have this look back at what we've done during the last year, um, because yes, we shared pictures on social medias, but we never had like a whole. Um, it was mostly pictures. There was nothing like more official, if I can say. So it was very nice to have this retrospective of what we've done, and also being able to kind of open up the conversation with the different researchers at Media Institute, because since that project, we have more and more people interested in working with SCOBY. So it was a nice opportunity to have this retrospective view on our work, but also being able to kind of introduce the next wave of designer, artists, and researchers here at Concordia. So it
Mm.
was a fun exercise.
Well, that's great. I'm glad that we have a platform to share it, and we'll do a lot more sharing in the future because there's definitely a lot of interest in the SCOBY material as well as kombucha. And you mentioned the Meilleur Institute, and so that's at Concordia University, which is in Montreal, Quebec. Is it Montreal?
Yeah. We are in Montreal, as you can see, right downtown.
Yeah. And so tell
Yeah.
me about the institute. Is it a design institute? Is it specifically for biofabrics? Like what's the deal with it?
So, Media Institute is a research institute within Concordia University, and they are a multidisciplinary institute divided in several clusters of research. To
Mhm.
give you a few examples, um, I'm part of the speculative life research cluster. So we are doing research about bacteria, algae, fungus, tissue culture, and all those kind of biological related things. There's a cluster related to digital media. There's a cluster more about textile and materiality. There is a cluster about indigenous future and indigenous culture. There's a cluster about graphic and picture representations and all those kind of 2D mediums. So yeah, even another cluster about performance and art. So it's very broad, and it's very interesting because this research institute is not dedicated to one faculty. It's open to any member of the school. So you can be from fine arts, you can be from engineering, urban studies, psychology. It's open to everyone at school.
That's really interesting. A really diverse group of people. And what got you into? Because I mean, you did talk in the documentary about the design, but what got you into working with kombucha SCOBY? Because I know you talk about yourself as a designer as well as a researcher. So how did you go from, I guess, designer into biomaterial designer?
So, okay, I'm gonna try to make a long story short. So I was, yeah, oh yeah, now I can say I was a student in Master of Design program because I finished my program a month ago. Yay. Uh, and my research during the program involved the use of mycelium, which is mushroom roots, because my research topic was about the use of mycelium and biomaterials in the field of public transport. And to do that research, I had to get access to this facility called Biolab from Milieu. And that's how I get in touch with Milieu, and that's how I get in touch with White Feather Hunter, who was she was the technician by interim in the lab. And so that's how I met her. And during the year, the lab organizes several workshops to explore new materials, to learn new skills. And there was this workshop about SCOBY. It was called Grow Your Own Cellulose. So it was the first introduction to SCOBY and cellulose. And after that workshop, there were several samples of kombucha growing in the lab.
Mm-hmm.
And Whitefeather did a first experiment where what she did was sewing several electronic components inside the SCOBY with, I think it was a silver thread. And she did this kind of flexible electronic fabric with the SCOBY. And it was also the first time that we saw something bigger, larger than a mason jar scale. Like the piece was maybe 30 or 40 centimeters long.
The piece of the SCOBY.
Yeah, it was kind of a big SCOBY, and it was the first time we saw that. And yeah, that's when we saw that we were okay. It would be nice to do more of those things, and even if we can go bigger, that would be great. So we tried different containers, slightly bigger, but still we were very limited in terms of size. And one day, I talk about this in the video. One day I was like, Whitefeather, is it possible to go much bigger than that? What's the size limit? And she told me this technically the container is the limit. And so I thought, so if it's like the size of a swimming pool, can the SCOBY be the size of a swimming pool? And she told me, basically, yeah. In theory, yeah. So, yeah, I looked at her thinking, okay, challenge accepted.
Yeah.
We're going to find the bigger container possible. And just minutes later, I went to this store, Canadian Tire, and I found those inflatable pool. And yeah, I didn't think twice. I bought it and I brought it back in the lab.
That's great. It's so interesting because a lot of people watching this and who are interested in kombucha and the world of kombucha have probably drunk a lot of kombucha, but also have made their own kombucha at home. And like you said, the SCOBY really fills out the container, whether it's a circular container or even a square container, it'll fill out right to the top. So your theory and what you were talking about in the video, you see this kid's swimming pool of kombucha and this giant layer of SCOBY on top, which is just so cool. And it made me think, you were talking about the Institute and why you got into the program. And I wonder, what is the vision for kombucha and cellulose fabrics? Is it to push the boundaries of what we think textiles are, or is it to find a replacement for cotton and polyester in the future?
I think there are many answers to that question. like right now, as we mentioned in the video, the material as it is right now, and considering our current state of knowledge about this material, it's not yet a viable solution for fabric because we can't yet treat the material so it lasts in time because it's sensible to the moisture. It tends to dry, it tends to crack,
Mm-hmm.
and because it's biodegradable, it will biodegrade through time. So we must find a way to protect it. And yeah, that's kind of a paradox, you know, that the material tends to dry, but we have to maintain the right amount of moisture inside of it. So it
Mm-hmm.
is still flexible, but also we have to protect it from moisture. So there are so many kind of contradictions and things like that. So it's very tricky to figure out a way to make it viable for the future. But just, I would say, as a designer, I really enjoyed this experience because uh, it brings a brand new way of thinking about the way we make things, the way we use the materials, um, the way we discard the materials, and that's something I really enjoyed working with biomaterials, whether it was kombucha or mycelium from the mushroom. It was this kind of flip in my relationship with the material. This time I didn't have to protect myself from the materials because if you work with plastics and things like that, they can be hazardous for your health.
Mm-hmm.
This time I had to protect the material from me. So it's a complete shift of paradigm between the creator and the creation. We have to take care of that during the process of making. And I think when you take care of something since the moment you make it, then you will take care of it during the use phase. And then after the use, uh, it's almost like a child in some way. You know, it takes so much of yourself to make it that once it's here and it's alive, you don't just dump the child. You take
Mm-hmm.
care
Well,
of
and the
it.
fact that it is alive and that you grew it is something that I think kombucha, whether you're an enthusiast or kombucha curious or a home brewer, when you make your own kombucha, you have a connection to it. And even at home, I was making kombucha a couple days ago. Was making a couple gallon batches of it, and I had to go into my SCOBY hotel, and I had a really thick SCOBY, and I need to cut it, and I just felt this. I felt like my heart was sinking as I was like either ripping it or cutting it because I knew it was like this live thing, and you have this connection to it. So I can definitely understand what you're saying about just having this personal connection with a living organism, and it's also really interesting that you do have a different view of the garments you're wearing because not that you care about them because they're well crafted, but also that it is or was once a a living thing, which is really really interesting. I guess on that same um, topic, are you? I mean, you're doing this in a lab and it's under controlled environment, and you have a team, and there's a thought process that goes into it. Can I make my own kombucha material at home? Like I saw White Feather, she was making some leather and some rope and that sort of thing. Is that something we can just do at home in our own experiments?
Oh yeah, I mean, if you brew your own kombucha, nothing prevents you from keeping the mother and just putting the mother in a bigger container. We are doing this in the lab because I'm working in an academic environment, so everything is highly regulated. But if I wanted, I could do it in my own kitchen. But I'm not sure if my roommates would allow me to do this.
Well, if I wanted to experiment with making a kombucha leather, let's say, or even just like a little bit of rope, just to do like one experiment myself, I can take even at a very small scale. So if I have a 1 gallon jug or even like a bowl, I don't know, let's say something like this and fill it with kombucha and then let the SCOBY form. How do I what do I do with it after? Because when I take it out, it's slimy, it's malleable, but it's you can't really do anything. It doesn't feel strong. So how do you get it from SCOBY to material?
So the process is extremely simple. You brew your own kombucha, and then you leave it for several weeks. If you have a transparent container, it's better in the sense that you can see the thickness of the mother on the top layer.
Mm-hmm.
So when you see that the layer is thick enough for you, so it's very empirical because when you dry the mother, it gets much thinner than when it is moist. So you have, through experience, you have to see, okay, if I have maybe 5 millimeters of SCOBY, wet SCOBY, how much left will be after the drying process? If I
Mm-hmm.
have 1 centimeter thick, how much thickness will I have in the end? So you have to play with that. You have to experiment.
And when you
So
dry it, you dehydrate it, like in a dehydrator or like in the oven, or just leave it out?
oh, we just laid down the SCOBY on a piece of tarp. It was a tarp because it was the scale of a
So
pool,
big, yeah.
but you can do it I've seen online people using plywood. Um, I tried it, but my SCOBY got kind of glued on it. Maybe because it was too thin, so it kind of stick to the plywood, and I wasn't able to remove it.
Yeah.
But I think even Suzanne Lee used the plywood to dry her kombucha, the SCOBY during her experiments. You can use waxed paper. You can use just a piece of plastic, like a Ziploc bag or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Just make sure it is laid on a horizontal surface and it's not enclosed, so it's well ventilated. Ideally, do it in a warm, kind of hot environment. I would say above 20 degrees Celsius, but the warmer the better because the
Okay.
faster the drying. And yeah, there's nothing more to do. As a precaution, I like to grease a little bit the surface on which the kombucha is laid.
Yep.
I use Vaseline because that's what we had in the lab, but I'm sure you can use any kind of natural oil because we know that Vaseline is petrol-based, so it might not be the best, but
And then
yeah,
once it's dried, so we lay it out. I'm just kind of go through the process in my mind. So we make the SCOBY, we lay down a little layer of, like you said, Vaseline or coconut oil or olive oil, whatever it is, to make sure it doesn't stick. And then we let it dry for a little bit. And then once it's dried, then it becomes firmer and stronger, I'm assuming. And that's
exactly.
when it turns into, then we can make it into a little rope or a bracelet or a tie or something.
Exactly. It will become, I don't know how we call this in English, but those kind of fruit paste,
Yeah.
kind of candy. The texture is very similar
Like
to
a
that.
well, like it's like a fruit leather.
Yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
you can work with that. I forgot to mention before the drying process, I would recommend you to wash it with water and soap. This will limit the smell. Yeah, and depending on the experience you do, the kombucha is very acidic. We talk about a pH about 3, and so it's very acidic. And one way to neutralize the acidity is bathing the SCOBY in a mix of water and baking soda. So you bath it for several minutes, and this will rise the pH, so it will be more neutral, around 6 something. I mentioned that because I wanted to try some experiments merging the kombucha and the mycelium because I was curious to see, okay, what can happen if I grow my mushroom roots on the kombucha? Can I make some sort of bio composite? And the first experiments didn't work because the SCOBY was too acidic. So this is something you can consider, especially after if you you plan to apply the kombucha on your skin, unless you want to have this kind of natural chemical peeling. But if you otherwise, yeah, bath it with water and baking soda. And
Yeah. No wonder you feel such a connection. I mean, just as you keep describing the processes, it's you begin by growing a SCOBY, so growing something and watching it grow up and get bigger, and then you take it out and delicately handle it and bathe it like you would a newborn almost, and make sure that you're just taking care of it and keeping it well kept and well cleaned. And all the while you're just building that connection with the SCOBY and with the fabric ultimately. So it's pretty amazing that that connection happens. So I'm just thinking of what's the future for you and for White Feather and for your team. I mean, in the video you talked about the dresses that were on display. Then there were dresses that were actually worn, but there was also issues with the longevity of those dresses being worn. So is the future to work on longevity, or is it to continue to experiment with, I don't know, different garments or collaborate with different designers on the future?
That's a very good question. Currently, White Feather is in Australia. She started a few weeks ago her PhD in Perth, in Australia. I don't know what her plan is about SCOBY in general. But it's funny because yesterday she sent me a picture of kombucha she has in Australia, and the whole structure of the SCOBY was completely messed up. Like we've never seen that before.
The structure meaning the like chemical or biological structure.
It was like on the picture, instead of having a flat SCOBY, there was a very interesting and crazy pattern on the SCOBY, and it was completely textured, and we have no idea what happened. And during an experiment I've done where I tried to grow a SCOBY in just water and a kind of sugar called maltodextrin, which is kind of a short, a simple sugar kind of. I had this weird thing happening where the SCOBY had no consistency and had this very strange structure. So this could be something that would be fun to investigate, to see what's the connection between the SCOBY and the mix of the drink. What can be the correlation between the kind of sugar, if we're using the classic sugar, the saccharose, if we are using maltodextrin, if we are using, I don't know, honey or maple syrup, what happens? So that would be fun to investigate. About the longevity of the material, again, I'm me neither. I don't know what to do because this was not my research. It was more White Feather and Courtney's research. I think Courtney would be interested to go back to this research. And on my side, I would love to continue experimenting with the SCOBY, trying to find application in the field of design, and why not in architecture. I talked to Hale. Hale, she is an architect, and she's also a student in the Master of Design program. In the video, we talked together about her work, yeah, she just came back from Iran, where she did this kind of performance using SCOBY at a very large scale, and she really fell in love with the material. She was very into the material before her trip to Iran, but after working on that scale, it was kind of an epiphany for her. And we are very motivated now to conduct some research and experiments in the field of architecture with kombucha. So working at very large scale and seeing how we can reinforce the material, seeing how we can shape the material. Are there new ways to grow the kombucha, being more water efficient? Because that's something we noticed. We use a lot of water to brew the kombuchas, and considering all those issues of the water, especially in Canada, there's a lot of issues with that in certain communities. We were thinking maybe it would be nice to be a bit more thoughtful with our use of water and being more efficient. So those are the kind of things we would like to try. What else? I would also love to try and see if we can grow 3D SCOBY instead of a flat SCOBY. So again, we have to think about different processes for that. Yeah, many ideas.
Yeah, I know. I can tell that there's just a million things going on. And I'm sure every day when you're in the lab, more questions come up and then you write them down. And then I'm sure you go back to the list of questions and it just keeps getting longer and longer. But that's for future. I mean, that's part of, we learn a little bit today and then we'll learn a little bit tomorrow. So we can, just as we're wrapping up, what if people are more interested in learning about your research and your design and the team that you have there, are they able to either support you in that or just kind of follow your journey? Like, how can they stay in touch other than following? Because we're going to have some more exhibits in the future at future kombucha festivals with Booch Fest, and we're going to bring in some more installations of the dresses and a few other materials. We're really excited this summer to do that and exhibit it. But if people want to stay connected or are really interested in following you, what can they do?
Well, I still don't have my own website. As I mentioned, I just finished school, so I'm not yet a professional with all the websites and everything. So I'm gonna work on that. However, you can still follow my work on Instagram, or you can follow people's work through Media Institute. They have a nice presence on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, social medias in general, and they also have a website. Maybe I will, maybe I can share the link for this website later.
Yeah, we'll share it in the description. We'll also send it out to the attendees so that they can follow it, because I know there is a profile on Boochie, and there's another video showing a little bit longer about the process when you're taking the material out of the pool and that sort of thing. So we can definitely share that. But this is great. I appreciate you taking some time out of the day and out of the lab. But it sounds like it's time for you to get back into knee deep in SCOBY and start designing.
Yeah. Well, it was a pleasure to be part of the conference. It was very fun to work on this video. Yeah, I'm very curious and looking forward to see what's going to happen next. I think, if my memory is right, you plan to do some Butch Fest in Montreal, right?
That's right. We're coming to your backyard. So maybe you can maybe over the weekend, we can just create some sort of material, or we can go halfway and then people can see the process in action. But you'll definitely be there in Montreal. It's going to be at the end of August, and we're going to be celebrating all things kombucha, the world of kombucha and everything about it, including SCOBY fashion and SCOBY material. So we'll come hang out when it's nice and warm, and we can go in the park and it's not -20 and icy and a foot of snow outside. So looking forward to seeing you and the rest of the group then. Thanks again for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your day, and thanks everybody for joining. See you soon.
See you. Thank you again.
Bye.